Hi, everyone, and welcome to Room for Us, a space where queer voices thrive. I'm your host, P, and every single week I like to sit down, get vulnerable, and talk about all things queer with all of you. So, as you all know, I posted this in my last video, but Room for Us was formerly Girl on Girl, a podcast I used to host with my best friend. Since I'm now hosting this podcast on my own, I really felt like the title Room for Us was a little bit more inclusive and spoke a lot more to my experiences right now. And I wanted to emulate something very cozy, something where we could all feel open and chat about just like everything, ranging from like our mental health to our queerness and like how we are just existing as humans in this world. And I'm going to be turning 30 this year. So I feel like when you're about to enter a new decade, you go through a lot of reflections. I've definitely been feeling that so much more so than I used to even in my 20s. I'm doing a lot of unlearning. I'm learning so much more about my struggles, my joys, things I need to work on. I also look at this podcast kind of like a weekly diary in a way where I can talk about my feelings and my experiences as a lesbian and hope that this reaches some of you and that you'll be able to also resonate with my story as well. And this episode that I'm going to be diving into was actually inspired by one of the listeners of Room for Us. They actually sent me a DM and they gave me permission to read their message. And they wanted to put this message out there because this is something that they're currently going through. And they hope that, if I share this message, we can have a discussion about it. And then maybe they'll also feel less alone in this feeling. Because when I read that message, I was like, this is very, very relatable. And I know you're not the only one who feels this. That is exactly what I want this podcast to be. I want it to feel like it's a safe space where we can have these open discussions. And I'm happy to do my research on a topic, or even if I relate to it, which I really related to what this listener said, we can feel seen. That's the ultimate goal, especially because as people who are queer, I feel like we're constantly trying to fight to feel seen, especially in a world that is pushing heteronormativity like at its forefront to us. So we're constantly trying to say, hey, we're here too, and we have feelings, and we deserve to exist exactly how we are. This topic is going to be all about feeling behind in life and how to kind of navigate that feeling when you feel like that's something that you're personally going through. If any of you ever have a message that you want to send to me, it's at Room for Us podcast. I read all DMs. That's probably the easiest place to reach me. So just shoot me a message on there. This listener said, "Hello there. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. So I'm sending this message because I'm just now thinking about a possible topic for the podcast. It's just an idea, and I think it would be nice and comforting that maybe other people in their 20s are struggling with this too, and maybe it feels relatable. I've been sitting with this feeling, sometimes more than other times, like I'm feeling a little behind in life. For me, it's more in the context of romantic relationships and career-wise at the moment. The last couple of months, I've come to the conclusion that I'm not satisfied with the career path I'm taking at the moment. It's in marketing, which I studied at university, but the stress or bit of anxiety to know it's not for me anymore has been a bit difficult to come to terms with, and more so, to change this and get out of the comfort zone. When I was studying marketing, it didn't feel like this was the thing I really wanted to do. Psychology and sports have been two special interests of mine since college, and back then I was thinking about switching my degree to study psychology, but at the time I didn't do it. Flash forward to now, I really want to give it a chance, but the feeling I'm going to, thinking like studying for 4 years at the age of 26, feels a little bit scary because of that feeling behind in life. But the idea of becoming a sports psychologist and a coach is really exciting, and it feels like I want that, but also scary, if you know what I mean. In romantic relationships too, I haven't had a serious relationship since I started dating. And when I look at my friends and family, I sometimes wonder why it's so difficult for me to find someone to have this connection with. I know I have to be patient with myself with this, but sometimes it's a bit of a struggle. I want to know if there are others that are sometimes struggling with this too. So I really wanted to share this. That is such a vulnerable message to share. So thank you so much for being so open and also willing to admit these feelings, because I think that's the first step, is naming the feeling, sending it out, or writing it down, whatever works for you. At least when you get it out there, it's almost like a weight off of your chest where you can be like, okay, I said it. This is how I've been feeling. And you know what? I guarantee after I talk about this, I know many people are going to say, I have been there. And to this listener, I have been there for sure. And there are still things that I have to unlearn to know that I am not behind in life. Nobody is quote unquote behind in life because we are all on our own personal journeys. There's a bit of a saying with this, and I really don't want it to sound cliche at all, but I do think it really resonates. And that saying is that life is not a race. And listen, I know that's cliche. We hear it all the time, but I really want it to sink in for a minute. Life is not a race, it's a journey. And us comparing ourselves to other people can be really inevitable, but it's only going to do you more harm because your life path is going to be different from your friends and from your family members. Everybody around you, everyone has their own individual journey they're going on, and we do have to trust the process. We tell ourselves, I know life is not a race, but how do we get out of that comparison? I feel like I do have some tips on how to get to that point because I feel like there are certain things I've been implementing that really do help me when I'm feeling that way. And I'll name through them. And I hope this does help you when you're ever feeling those feelings of like I'm behind, everyone else seems to be so ahead. The fact of the matter is, we're only going to be seeing highlights of people. So if you're looking at social media and you see someone who's your age and it just seems like what they're presenting is that they have everything together. Like maybe they're traveling the world, they have a really high paying job, or they have a partner and like a house. Maybe they own a house. I'm just naming all these examples. And you're just like, I'm not even close to being there yet. That is okay. It's good to celebrate people and congratulate them on their wins because you know, everyone as humans, we all experience so many different emotions. Nothing is ever linear. So celebrate the wins that they have, but also know like not everything is so ideal as it might seem. I think when we like romanticize someone else's life, it makes us feel really bad because we're thinking, well, they must have it all, but they don't. They really, really don't. And I think that's a good reminder of like when you look at the people around you, you can celebrate them and be happy for them and just know like you will get there one day too. And there are definitely things that they might see about you that they're like, I celebrate this about you. And I could only feel like inspired to achieve certain things in life, whether it is like you even wanting to break out of this like marketing role and eventually try and study sports and psychology because you know that's where your deep passion lies. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to recognize and really try to put into action. Getting out of the comfort zone is so important because if you're not, you're basically in a cage. And this was pulled from Brianna Weiss' book, The Pivot Year. And I was like, this is so true, you know? And like, these are ways you can really have the most transformative year of your life. Taking that step to say, I'm going to really try my best to stop comparing myself to the people around me, really focus inside about what you want. And you know, deep down, you want a career change. Maybe it's familiar and you know, this is something that could land you a good job, like right out of college. But is it really going to feed your soul? Because you might look back years later and say, what if? And I think one thing I want to emphasize is that I know it may not sound ideal for anyone who wants to make a change because you're right. I mean, you might have to start from square one again, which means studying for another 4 years when you've already graduated. But I do know it's going to be worth it because it's going to be something that you're actually a lot more passionate about. And you'll look back and say, I'm really glad I made that change. And I have a friend who actually did exactly that. She was a teacher, really wasn't feeling passionate about what she was doing and the work she was doing. She was really anxious a lot of the time and she would have trouble like focusing on other things because she had so much anxiety around this job she was doing. And she ended up totally doing a career switch. And now she's actually training a bunch of athletes and she's very very motivated by this form of work. And I'm so proud of her because it's not easy to make these changes. But the fact that she did it, she's really aligning with the path that is so true to her. And as I mentioned before, I think she must have had the same fears as you. Like, should I really do this switch after I've like completed all these years of training to become a teacher? But if it's not for you, it's okay. If you looked at her path, it may not look linear because a lot of times life is just not meant to be linear. You're going to be going left, right, up. You might be going down a little bit, but that is okay. How I saw my parents growing up was things were kind of very like straightforward. And I think we're all kind of taught this. Like, once you graduate high school, you make a decision as to what you want to study in college or university. And then right out of college and university, you find a job and then you find a partner, you get married, you have kids. Like there's all these steps that are so ingrained in us. But because we're all on our own unique life paths, how is that going to be everybody's path? That just makes zero sense. And I can really relate to the feeling behind in life, especially in romantic relationships, because I grew up in Whitby, Ontario, which is like a smaller town outside of Toronto. When I was in high school, I was also dealing with my own sexuality, definitely not coming to terms with it, shoving it aside because I didn't see any representation. So feeling like I could like women, it didn't feel like a reality for me. I've talked about this in past episodes, but when I look back at my high school experience, I really developed like super strong feelings for one of my best friends in high school. But I definitely shoved that down somewhere because it just didn't feel like that could ever be a real thing for me. And it's because I was growing up in an environment, and this isn't even in my home environment. I just think in general, like your school environment, the people I was around. I just mean like it just felt what made sense to me was like, I will eventually meet a boy. I'll have a boyfriend, and then maybe I'll get married when I'm like 25, and then maybe have kids. It's just these things are so ingrained in us that we don't even take a moment to sit back and think, but what is it I really want? So, back to feeling behind in romantic relationships, I really felt that way because I knew something didn't feel right about the guys I was like trying to pursue or the guys trying to pursue me. I feel like I could see it around me. Like a lot of my friends actually were in relationships. And I think like when you're younger, especially in your early 20s, that's the time you're really developing a lot of your core interests. You're really discovering who you are or getting to the like, it's like the beginning stages of that. So when I was around so many couples, that was just kind of all I saw. I always felt a little bit out of place in ways because I was like, I just really want to meet somebody too. I really want a relationship. And why is this like these connections not really happening for me? Finally, when I kind of discovered, oh, Purse, you're gay, that was a huge relief because I was like, I now like know this is what has been missing my whole life. But it still was taking me a very long time to develop like a deep, strong connection in a relationship that like I really felt I deserved because I was going through a lot of experiences. Some things just weren't working out. So I still felt that feeling like I feel so behind. I feel like everyone around me is like experiencing these long-term relationships, but it is okay. It is completely okay to be experiencing different types of people, or like, even as you said, you've been dating and you're really getting to know what's going to work for you, what doesn't work for you. And the key thing is it seems like you're putting yourself out there. So if you're feeling like behind because maybe a lot of your friends or like family members might be asking if you have a partner or something, it's okay. And you should never feel any shame or embarrassment if the answer is just like, no, I just haven't met the right person yet. I sometimes think there's something very beautiful about meeting somebody later in life. Because I also find that as we're discovering so much about ourselves and we're learning like through just life, just living life as a young adult, there's like a type of emotional maturity, I think, that we start to really develop. So when the time comes when you meet someone, whenever that is in your life, and if it's like into your later adult years, I think there's like a lot of learning you've already done, whether it's been through like yourself, just like solo, or you've learned a lot through like past relationships that maybe didn't really work out. My partner, Crystal, was actually my first serious relationship ever. And her and I started dating when I was 27, and Crystal was 30 when she met me. It doesn't mean that if I look back at my past experiences, I'm like undermining it because I did find myself in more like situationships. I would see people, but it was only for like a few months, not very serious. When I actually entered my serious relationship with my partner, I felt like I was very ready for it because emotionally, I was just very open. I wasn't holding on to things in the past because I found myself kind of doing that as a pattern. I would have a very hard time letting go. But because I went through some of those experiences, I really found myself trusting myself more and feeling less like I needed a romantic relationship to feel fulfilled. Romantic relationships will not cure maybe those feelings of like loneliness or feeling behind. You definitely might compare yourself to the others around you and you're saying like, "Oh, I just really want a partner." But I am telling you, once you find yourself in that, it's not going to cure you. And I think that's like a good thing to remember is that romantic relationships do not fulfill that feeling behind. Like romantic relationships can add such a beautiful layer to our life, and it's so amazing to share your life with a partner or partners. If you can lean into this and tell yourself that I know I am going to meet the right person when the right time comes along for me. I just know that when that time comes, it's going to be less of a, I really, really just want to have a partner and more like, I am so glad that I'm in this like good place in my life. And I find I've found that fulfillment and I'm excited to see what this relationship is going to be bringing into my life as like an addition versus as if I get into a relationship, maybe it's going to cure all my insecurities or feelings of like that loneliness. I mean, I think I had that a little bit too. I feel like when I was in my earlier 20s, there was something within myself and my self-esteem that it wasn't 100. I definitely relied on a lot of other people for like my happiness. And I had to do a lot of discovering deep down to kind of see what those issues were. And I mentioned before, I was kind of like a huge people pleaser in the past too. And sometimes people may question you for those boundaries that you start to place. The most important thing with that is that you're staying true to exactly what you want versus what other people want. It's not to say that you need to be completely fulfilled or healed or anything before you find yourself in a relationship. I'm definitely not saying that because I think you can meet someone and start dating them and you can be unhealed and that's okay. I actually had a relationship expert, Donna Noble, where Donna said it's a really common myth where people say you need to be 100% fulfilled and good with yourself and healed before you enter a relationship. But that's completely false because sometimes when you're in a relationship, that's what really tests you the most, where you can actually see the parts of yourself that are still unhealed and what are the things that like you and your partner can work on together and what are parts of them that they're seeing is unhealed that they still need to work on. As queer people, I think it's actually very common that we sometimes find a partner a little later in life because I actually feel like I was more of a experiencing like those highs, like extreme highs of giddiness when I discovered I was gay, almost like those feelings you would have had when you were in high school because I was actually able to fully live that out in my 20s. So I would feel like even if I was 22, 23, falling for somebody or like discovering I had a crush on another girl, it almost like brought me back to those like feelings of puppy love you might have when you're in high school and you're discovering that. I didn't really have those experiences in high school because the person who I really liked, I mean, I kept being so defensive as like, they're my friend, they're my friend. I didn't want anything to be ruined in that regard, right? I didn't want to ruin a friendship. But when I like reflected back on that friendship in high school, in ways, I think I would consider that to be like a high school love in a way. You know what I mean? Like it was a deep friendship, but there was also forms of like infatuation and like friendship love there. But for me, I definitely wanted more. I think love is a very deep word too, that I definitely need to emphasize that I was very young and like discovering these like feelings for the first time. But there was such a deep care for my friend at the time. And we call her Alice on this podcast. But there was such a deep love for Alice as a person in general. And for me, that ended up becoming romantic. Like internally, I discovered that like later, like years later. I was like, oh, those were definitely romantic feelings. I just want to say back to your message, if you're feeling behind as a lesbian, I mean, I know that's a very common experience because we have to unlearn what society has been telling everybody. And what we're told in the society is that heteronormative relationships are normal. So we're the community that's trying to unlearn and like we're actually discovering these parts of ourselves that are real. And we want to live our lives authentically, but we're trying to do that in a world that can be so hateful. So it is really, really difficult. But what I will say is that it's never ever too late. And if anything, just trust in the universe that the right person will come along and they will never make you question anything. And to be honest, like sometimes people will start dating when they're so young and they hold on to the wrong relationships because it's familiarity. You could know you're in the wrong relationship, but you might be holding on because now you've like built such a life and it's like you're scared to let go. I think that can be a very common thing, and that can also happen too. So I would say as well, like, don't compare. Again, it kind of comes back to the constant, like, please do not compare yourself to other people because while you might see, oh, but my friend has been in a relationship for so many years, or I'm always the single friend or something. You just never know what everyone's individual journey looks like. And sometimes for them, that could even be like they got into a relationship so young and spent so many years together, but then now they're breaking up because they're really realizing like we're not on the same wavelength. We're going in different directions. That's why I say it's really important not to compare, even though it can feel very easy to, especially in a world where our phones are just at our fingertips. We can glimpse into anyone's life through their social media whenever we want. And even if you've always been like the single friend, we change so much from our teens to our 20s to our 30s. And you were mentioning you're 26. I already know you're gonna discover yourself like changing each year. And if I think about how when I was like maybe 24, 25, feeling very like con concerned isn't the right word, but I definitely felt that feeling of like behind in life because I hadn't had a serious relationship yet. I was definitely feeling like, oh my God, 25 feels so old. Like, you know what I mean? Because I was comparing myself to everybody else. All of my friends had been in relationships by then. So I was kind of constantly in my head thinking, I haven't even met anybody yet, let alone even like experienced a serious relationship. But I think when I was really ready to, and I was aligned with myself in many ways. I still had so much healing to do, but I was definitely just trusting. I was just letting go and just trusting. And then 2 years later, a really beautiful person did walk into my life, and we've been together for 2.5 years. It's also one of those things, too, where like you can meet someone later, but then you're at a bit of a different place when you're older too, when you're like the relationship will kind of develop. You'll see if this is what you want, but you'll see it kind of does develop in like a serious way if that's what you're both ready for. Versus sometimes like when you are younger, it's like it can be a different type of relationship. So there's things you'll notice later on, but just trust in the process and always look back at your past experiences and say, all of these experiences had led me to this moment. So there's no feeling of being behind. It's just that your life path is going to look a lot different than the people around you, and that's okay. I think the one thing I would always encourage too is try not to ever second guess yourself or doubt yourself. I think it's really easy to do that. I think even with the example too, going back to career, you might be thinking, well, I studied marketing, so now it just makes sense to take a marketing job as the next move. But I know my passion lies in this sector, which is sports and psychology. I think when your gut is telling you something, you really need to listen to it. I think as humans, we really complicate things sometimes, but it's not our fault. It's because we live in a world that can feel so matter of fact, or it can be such a big deal if you're making a switch, but you're allowed to make a switch compared to maybe at the time when our parents were growing up, probably. I think that's what millennials right now and Gen Z, like we're trying to unlearn those patterns of our parents where you were just presented in this way because this was a means to survive, and I totally get that. So you almost take the job that's comfortable, like it's going to pay your bills. But I think that if you feel ready for this and you can do it and you really can like make the choice that's more aligned in your passions, I would 100% encourage you to do it because I would never want you to just take something that felt safe where years down the road it actually causes you a lot more like mental stress because you know this is something you're not enjoying. It's something that's not feeding your soul. And I think this is a year too where I'm trying to ask myself, what really feeds my soul? What really makes me happy? And if you think about it, our careers and what we choose to do, our passion projects, whatever it is, takes up a lot of our life. It's many, many hours we dedicate every single week to a job. And I know that bringing in income is so important, but I just think that we really need to put our mental health first. I'm a huge believer in that. I feel like I was so go, go, go as well, like in my 20s, kind of doing what I had to do because I was living with roommates. I've been living on my own since I was 17, really. So trying to make sure that I was like financially fulfilled was a really, really big goal of mine. But then I also thought, like, to what extent when it's affecting my mental health, or I find myself in these jobs or these roles that they're stressing me out because I'm feeling like I'm not really aligned. And if this helps you at all, like for most of my 20s, I was kind of struggling in jobs. I always found myself in these like social media management, like marketing roles. They would really, really stress me out. It would make me feel anxious a lot of the time. I was always on edge because I felt like there was a lot of pressure on me. But I've been really leaning into my love for writing a lot. And I found a role that I think is really, really up my alley and something I'm enjoying a lot more. And it's copywriting, and meaning like I'm just writing for social media ads or I'm writing for emails, writing for websites, writing for any kind of publications. I've been really, really loving it. And to be honest, I only really made that discovery this year in 2025. So I've had a and I'll get into this in other episodes, but I feel like I would have that feeling of that behind in life because I felt I was in these jobs that I was doing because, yes, it was a paycheck, but I was feeling like, oh no, is it becoming too late to do a career switch to something that feels more aligned with me? And when someone gives you a chance, I'm like so grateful for it because then you can really lean into it and then find this is a role that actually I really enjoy and I think I'm good at. And that's a beautiful thing. I would even feel this way as well. Like my first love has always been public speaking and radio and television. That's what I went to school for. So I went to school for journalism, radio, and television. And I took a job in marketing like right out of graduation, pretty much. I landed a job as an intern at a marketing agency. A social media intern was the role. Knew nothing about social media at all, like in terms of working in social media, but I still took it and I had a really good experience. Like I don't get me wrong, I actually that job did kickstart me into that world, but over time I was noticing that managing like different accounts and being fully immersed in the social media experience like really did like cause me a lot of stress and I would talk to my mom about this a lot, too, just saying like I feel some forms of regret too for maybe not pursuing like my love of like radio and television. But to be honest, like I was trying. It's not that I didn't try to like apply to be at certain TV stations or even apply for some radio gigs. But maybe because the familiarity of me working in marketing was like that consistent paycheck, I kind of just continued to lean into that, even though I knew, this is kind of stressing me out. But what I'm grateful for is that I find nowadays we have these outlets where we can pursue certain passions. So even me, finding that radio and television was always my number one passion. I always wanted to be like a TV host. That was like the number one goal of mine. Now I host my own podcast and I can talk about things I want to talk about. I also think talking about being gay is very important, especially in this political climate where we need to be speaking out about it more, talking about our experiences more, especially like being a person of color. That's very important to me. Even though there were times when I was feeling very behind in life when I was still in my earlier 20s, I think that taking that leap, even though it scared me, to kind of say, I'm going to take my passion for what I have and put it onto the internet because that is something now we can really utilize. Like social media in that aspect, like was very helpful for me because I had so many skills from like my marketing jobs at advertising agencies. And now I could take that and build that into something I want to build for myself. I always used to be confused about my own personal journey. I always felt like, oh my gosh, am I making these mistakes? Did I find myself in roles that I didn't actually really want to take? And I could have been doing something else. Like I used to think about that all the time when I was like 23, 24, 25. Like for a good few years in my 20s, I would think about that all the time and would feel very stressed because I think there's so much pressure put on us too when you're like graduating high school. It's like, okay, pick what you want to do. And surprisingly, I knew what I wanted to do. I think like I'm grateful for that, but I had a lot of like regrets, feeling like I didn't pursue what I really wanted to do post graduation. But I think now I'm at a place in my life where I'm not afraid to make those changes and like lean into the things that like really do fill up my cup. And a huge thing that fills up my cup really is this podcast. So grateful for all of you and grateful also to be able to share my story and just be as honest as possible that my journey hasn't been linear. And I've talked about this before where maybe on my social media, you're just going to see the highlights, really. And I think a lot of people do that. You'll see highlights of like time with friends, trips, like going out with my partner, all these things. But there's so many things I want to dive into later of the struggles I do go through, like mentally, like the dark times I sometimes feel, or the constant pressure I put on myself. Maybe the one thing we can take from that, like feeling behind in life, is that I don't know if there's such thing as like being behind in life. Who was the one to like put all these like pressures or these timelines in place of when's the first time you're gonna move out of your home? When are you gonna be financially stable? When are you gonna find a partner? When are you gonna find a job? When are you going to buy a house? Like, how much money should you have, like, saved up by the time you're 30? We're all so different. Let's just embrace that we're all so different. And once again, like I said, celebrate the wins of others and be happy for them, but also celebrate yourself. Celebrate how far you've come and the fact that we're able to be super reflective as people and think about it really deep down. Take that time to think about what we really want. Something I'm grateful for too is that I was very, maybe like a little distracted in my 20s. I feel like I filled my time too with lots of friend time because once again, as I mentioned, I wasn't necessarily in a serious romantic relationship in my 20s. So I would really fill my time up with like friends, family, like relying on people to make me happy. And then when I'd have that time on my own, I don't even think I like thought about deep down what is it that really affects me? What are the things I really want? I think I was very quick to like shove it away somewhere and not want to deal with it. And then, I'm 29 now and I feel like I've gotten to know myself way more over the last few years than I really did when I was younger. I think we're all still just trying to figure it out. My advice overall is to just lean into that feeling and say, it's okay that I might be feeling behind in life, but just know that there is a path for you. When it does come for you, you're going to hit these like different milestones in life. I know you will. You're going to say, yep, that makes sense. And I'm kind of glad I went through my experiences in the past, or I'm glad I didn't rush into anything that wasn't actually for me. And sometimes our body tells us a lot. Our bodies tell us things first, actually. I think even before we can verbally say it, or maybe even our minds, sometimes your body will have like a visceral reaction. And I think mine would too. In when I was feeling very stressed and burnt out from certain jobs I was taking. But I think when you really sit down and listen to what you really want, you'll start to see your real self. It's so interesting. I feel like when I was younger, I had a very like skewed perception of like age, and maybe a lot of us did because times are changing and nowadays I feel like people are actually pursuing their real dreams much older in life. My sister is 8 years older than me. Like when I was in high school, I remember taking the train to Toronto to spend time with her in the condo she owned at like 22, 23. And I have to remember, like, the times were different then too. Like even the market in Toronto, the housing market was very different. But if I was to compare myself to my sister, it's not fair. It's really not fair. But it was easy to at that time. When I was 22, I was living with a roommate and I had to live with a roommate financially. It's the only thing that made sense for me at the time. Toronto is expensive, an expensive city. I think in many ways, I sometimes would idealize what my sister's life would look like because in my mind, she had hit all these milestones that like I just wasn't hitting yet. But that's okay. My time came a little bit later. And even in ways too, when I would compare myself to my friends in terms of relationships, that was probably the biggest one was relationships. I was like the only single person for the longest time. Why are we always comparing ourselves to the people around us? And if you can get to that feeling of knowing I trust in the universe and I trust that maybe certain things aren't happening right now for a reason, it can give you so much peace. It can give you like a lot of clarity because why would we ever try to like force something to happen if it's not just happening naturally right now? And I think we need to remember like that's probably happening for a reason. And you'll look back one day and be like, that made a lot of sense. Or, someone could be striving for the longest time trying to climb the corporate ladder. But then eventually they might look back later and say, that's not the kind of job I wanted to do. Like maybe I felt a little bit pressured to keep climbing up the ladder, but maybe my dream in life is to really just travel the world. Who says that's not okay to do? So many people do gain success like later in life. I remember feeling this too because I do relate as well to like the career thing and what my true passions were. I would sometimes look at this list of people who really gain success later in life. So maybe this will actually help you feel better. Mind you, this is from ChatGPT because I just wanted a quick answer, to be honest. Because when you like Google some of these articles, I was like, you know what, this is just quite long. Let me just go to ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT who are some people who became successful later in life. And they curated a list where they named different people who are entrepreneurs and they're in business, writers and authors, actors and entertainers, artists and creators, scientists. So I'm just going to name you who they mentioned to me. We have Morgan Freeman, actually got his big break in Street Smart at 50. Alan Rickman landed his first film role in Die Hard at 41. Lucille Ball became iconic with I Love Lucy in her 40s. And we also have Kris Jenner, someone who definitely like achieved more success later in her life, even after some early achievements. So her major breakthrough, I believe, was in her early 50s. It says here she did have a bit of a public presence as the wife of Robert Kardashian and then Caitlyn Jenner, but Kris became a powerful media mogul in her 50s when she launched Keeping Up with the Kardashians in 2007. And apparently she was 51. So, as we all know, Kris Jenner is like the master momager. She turned her family name into a $1 billion brand and now manages multiple businesses like cosmetics, fashion, endorsements. Oprah Winfrey is a huge one and someone who I really admire. But Oprah did have her major breakthrough. I think it was more in her 40s, mid 30s to 40s, but she built like mega success over the decades. She did have success in local media and TV in her 20s and 30s, but her empire building began in her 40s and beyond. That's when she launched Harpo Productions at 35 and then became a billionaire in her late 40s. So this just goes to show, and I just wanted to name this as an example because we are so hard on ourselves, I think, once we get to adulthood. And maybe it's because we have like this pressure that society tells you you need to be doing certain things by a certain age. But if you ever just want to Google, and I would actually go to like look into some articles, but like I said, ChatGPT was the quick answer. It gave me a quick list of people who do become successful later in life because it leaves you with some inspiration to also know that your life isn't over. Think about how much time you do have to continue expanding and leaning into your passions. Like, please, I like beg you to not think, by the time I hit 30, I need to have it all figured out. Even with me turning 30 this year, I do not have it all figured out. I'm slowly starting to learn what really feeds my soul, what makes me happy. Even in my relationship with Crystal, like I'm so happy that I waited and really found a partner where we test each other. I'm so happy I'm with someone who really tests me and has helped me find these parts of myself that I knew I needed to lean into further and also heal in myself because I had someone who was testing me. She's very different from me, and that's something that I appreciate. And it's something that I've learned like I know what the qualities are in a partner I really want, and I'm excited to get to know myself while being in the relationship, but also getting to know myself as an individual because that person has always existed. I've just finally like dug in a little deeper, and I'm less reliant on others for my happiness. That's a really, really big thing. And then, yeah, like I said, career-wise, I mean, look at all the people I just named. We don't know what their experiences were when they were younger, but their life paths were showcasing that something was meant for them later in life. It's good to stay intentional with yourself and just know that things are going to happen to you when they're meant to. I really, really believe that. Just release that control. It's important too, like, don't put people on pedestals. You might see a friend who might seem like they have everything that maybe you want, and you're wondering, why don't I have that? I promise you, that person is also on their own personal journey and they have their own struggles as they do have their own wins. Never idealize anybody's life. That is something I've always been like a huge believer in because you never know what people are really going through. So just stop with the comparisons, even though it can be easy in the world of social media. But please, please try not to compare. Start to really build that love and trust with yourself because I know that all of you have a path you're on, and try to follow it as true to yourself as you can. I'm going to wrap up this episode here. I really hope that this resonated with some of you. And if anyone else feels behind in life, please don't feel shy to like send me a message on the Room for Us podcast page. I'm always answering, I'm always checking DMs. Like I said, like please message me and we can have a really open discussion about it. And if there's any topics you want me to cover on this podcast, please let me know. Thank you for being here. As always, I really appreciate you joining me for this cozy chat, and I will see you next week.